G'day cocktail lover, what can I get for you today? I read that May 15 was World Cocktail Day. Do you have any special drinks for the day? I'm sure I can come up with something to fit this auspicious occasion. But didn't you say Cocktail Day was a couple of weeks ago? I may have mentioned before these days are somewhat arbitrary and they're more about marketing than anything else, but this one is more fitting as World Cocktail Day because it's actually the anniversary of when the Oxford Dictionary first added the word cocktail to the dictionary. And how did they define it? It's a drink composed of spirit, sugar, bitters, and water. The water usually coming from stirring the drink on ice. That's an old-fashioned, isn't it? Popular folklore has it that this was known as the cocktail. That's what people would order, give me a cocktail. And they'd get whiskey, sugar, bitters stirred on ice. Then some clever dick said, I'm going to do an improved cocktail. And lo and behold, we have the improved cocktail that had maraschino and absinthe in it. And people started adding all sorts of things to the mixed drinks. They became collectively known as cocktails. But the story goes, when someone wanted the original one, they said, give me a cocktail. And the bartender started mixing something up. They went, no, I want it the old-fashioned way. So now we call it an old-fashioned. I reckon someone from that era would be pretty overwhelmed by a cocktail bar today. To be honest, I'm pretty overwhelmed by the choices myself, even if you limit yourself to the classics and the modern classics. There are so many options. So is an old-fashioned the right drink to celebrate World Cocktail Day? I'm going to say yes with a twist. Like I said, these drink days are mostly about marketing, and some clever marketing from the Chartreuse people. They decided that the 16th of May is Chartreuse Day, because in their folklore, the recipe for green chartreuse dates back to 1605. So that becomes Chartreuse Day. I get it, 16th day of the 5th month, 1605 is Chartreuse Day. I thought I'd combine the two. For me, the only competition for an old-fashioned is arguably the best known chartreuse cocktail, and that's the Last Word. Is that an old drink or a modern one? In some ways it's both. The original equal parts recipe of gin, chartreuse, maraschino, and lime juice is more than 100 years old, but it was pretty much forgotten after about the mid-20th century, and then part of the cocktail renaissance, it was rediscovered, and not only did the Last Word become popular again, it became very popular for bartenders to do riffs on it. Why do so many bartenders do variations of a Last Word? The 4 equal parts gives you lots of scope to swap pieces out, Mr. Potato Head style. Try a different spirit, try a different herbal liqueur, try a different sweet liqueur, try a different juice. These are all ways you can still maintain a balance but bring out different flavors and make a unique drink. So are you going to do me the original or a riff? I'm going to come at it a bit sideways. When you look at it, the Last Word is essentially a split base sour. So why not do a split base old-fashioned but echoing back the factors that are in the Last Word? It's an experiment. Why are you always experimenting on me? I fully expect you to attach electrodes to me one day. What? What have you heard? What do you mean? Ha! Nothing. No, nothing. No, don't worry about it. Forget I said anything. Don't go near the cellar. We don't have a cellar. We don't have a cellar. There's no electrodes. Just drinks. No matter what you've heard. You are very bad at reassuring people. Let's stick with the drink then. So an old-fashioned that calls back to the Last Word. First up, the gin. I'm going to use a gin that's actually aged in ex-bourbon barrels. This is from local maker Tiny Bear. They're Navy strength. This is a barrel strength, barrel-aged gin. So it's a nice midway between a gin and a whiskey. So we're starting with this 1 ounce of our barrel-aged gin in our mixing glass. Next comes our chartreuse, and for this experiment, I'm going to make it equal parts. I'm going to do 1 ounce or 30 mils of green chartreuse in our mixing glass. For the sugar element of this old-fashioned variation, rather than using a sugar syrup, I'm actually going to use maraschino liqueur, but a significantly smaller amount, about a quarter to a third of an ounce, so somewhere around 10 mils of maraschino liqueur going in our mixing glass. Finally, the bitters, and as another callback to the Last Word, instead of lime juice in this old-fashioned, I'm going to put 2 dashes of lime bitters in our mixing glass. And in deference to the Chartreuse coming from France, here is your Vieux Mot, or an old word. Ooh, that's much more herbal than an old-fashioned usually is. Not really surprising with the Chartreuse. They go really well together though. It's amazing. Did you really just make this up? It works really well. I also think there's a lot of room to play around with this recipe. You could use less Chartreuse and more gin. You could use less or more of the sweetener according to your taste. You could even drop out the lime bitters and go with the more traditional aromatic bitters. It just goes to show, even with what sounds like a really constrained recipe, all you've got to work with is spirit, sugar, bitters, there's really an endless array of things that you can experiment with to make so many different drinks. Life is too short to have boring cocktails.